Cahokia is the oldest community in Illinois and in the entire Mississippi Valley, older than both New Orleans and St. Louis. Cahokia began as a French Catholic mission that was established at a village of Tamaroa and Cahokia Indians in 1699. The nearby Mississippi River, its confluence with the Missouri just upstream, and its confluence with the Illinois River just a few miles further north, put the new settlement at the intersection of three major trading highways.
When Cahokia was founded, the French had been trading in the huge region called the Illinois Country for at least 25 years. No one knows for sure when the first coureurs du bois came to trap and trade with the natives. Some of them reportedly traveled up the Missouri River into the Rocky Mountains 100 years before the celebrated mountain men. Little is known of their explorations because most coureurs du bois were either illiterate or did not record their travels.
There were never specific boundaries for the Illinois country, but by the mid-18th century, it was generally understood to consist of all French-claimed territory from the mouth of the Ohio River north to the Great Lakes, including the valleys of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio rivers.
Establishing a lucrative fur trade was the main reason the French settled in the Illinois country. Furs were at a premium in Europe because European fur-bearing animals were all but extinct. The finest men's hats were made from a type of felt that came from processing beaver pelts. There were fortunes to be made trapping and trading beaver pelts.
The French were also committed to converting the native population to Christianity. When the mission site was chosen at Cahokia, it was estimated there were more than 2,000 natives in the area. Cahokia was rich with potential converts and trading partners. Most of the traders were born in Canada. They were pioneers, self-sufficient, and independent. They acknowledged no nobility and made their own law. They were content to live, to hunt, and trap as they had in the North Country, to cultivate fertile bottomland, and at the end of the day to gossip on the porch, to dance, or have a mug of rum at the tavern.
Trade was the initial bond between the Indians and the French. The beaver pelt was the recognized medium of exchange. For example, one beaver pelt was worth one kettle in trade. One trade gun cost 16 beaver pelts. Otter skins were also highly prized. One otter skin equaled 2 beaver pelts.
Relations between the French and Indians were friendly, and in some cases their cultures intermingled. Cahokia remained the center for Indian fur trade when Kaskaskia and Fort Deschartres were later established further to the south.
Even though relations were good, contact with the French contributed to the decline of the Illini. A century after the French settled Cahokia, the natives would be gone from Illinois entirely. There were several contributing factors. The Indians died from European diseases like smallpox. Even their conversion to Christianity contributed to their decline. When the Illini renounced polygamy and began taking only one wife, the birth rate dropped dramatically. And decades of intertribal warfare took its toll on the Illini.
As the French settlements became more established, Cahokia and the entire American bottom became the breadbasket for the French colonies in North America.
One historian wrote, "The Illinois habitant was a farmer and a fur trader. Sometimes he was also a carpenter, smith, or tailor, but even then he was first a tiller of the soil. And when the crops were in and there was no work for his tools or his needle, he left farming to his wife and hired himself out to one of the village merchants to carry trade goods to the Indians. A fur trader he wanted to be for the wealth he might gain. A farmer he had to be in order that the Illinois country could be the granary of all of Louisiana."
The Catholic Church was the center of daily life in the French settlements. Bells rang to tell people the time of day. All public notices were posted on the church doors. The parish priest settled disputes.
A modern visitor to the French villages in Illinois would think them haphazard. The streets were narrow and unsurveyed. The houses lay clustered near the parish church, each with its own attendant gardens and outbuildings. Interiors were plastered walls and whitewashed. The most outstanding characteristic of many French homes was the porch, extending across the front and back, along 3 sides, or sometimes around the entire house.
The early French houses in Illinois were much like those of Old Normandy and Canada. Instead of stacking logs horizontally as the Americans did, the French used a post-on-foundation method of log construction. They built walls of upright logs and filled the spaces between them with a mixture of stone and mortar.
The Cahokia Courthouse was built as a residence around 1740. The restored courthouse is an excellent example of log post-on-foundation construction.
After the French and Indian War, the Illinois country and Canada became British possessions. Many of the French in Cahokia refused to become British subjects. They moved across the Mississippi, where they helped found the city of St. Louis in 1764.
The British were behind one of old Cahokia's most famous incidents. Chief Pontiac had rallied the remnants of some 18 fragmented and disheartened Midwestern Indian tribes and led them against the British near the conclusion of the French and Indian War. Under the direction of Pontiac, the tribes attacked a dozen places simultaneously, with victory nearly always on their side. Pontiac very nearly succeeded in driving the British back beyond the Alleghenies.
The tide of fortune began to fall for Pontiac when news of the French defeat reached the Illinois country. Pontiac refused to make peace with the British and continued organizing mayhem in Illinois. In 1765, he finally relented to the British occupation and sought refuge in Missouri. When he returned to Cahokia to visit friends, Pontiac was murdered by a Peoria Indian outside a general store. The site of Pontiac's murder is across the street from the present Cahokia Courthouse historic site.
What became the Cahokia Courthouse was still a private residence during the American Revolution, when a contingent of George Rogers Clark's Virginia Rangers captured Cahokia on July 5, 1778. This was just one day after Clark and the rest of his command surprised the British and captured Kaskaskia.
With Clark's arrival, the Cahokians were drawn into the war. When Clark made this march across the flooded bottomland to attack the British at Vincennes, many Cahokians were under his command.
Due to the instability caused by this series of colonial wars, Cahokia went into a season of decline. Spanish St. Louis, built on higher ground, not so prone to periodic floods, supplanted Cahokia's western fur trade traffic on the Missouri River. St. Louis was well on its way to becoming a commercial center.
In 1787, the Northwest Ordinance mandated a courthouse, county jail, pillory, whipping post, and stocks in every county. Francois Saucier sold his Cahokia residence to St. Clair County.
The newly purchased Cahokia Courthouse was the administrative, political, and judicial center for much of the Northwest Territory from 1790 to 1814. Many of the cases tried in the Cahokia Courthouse were civil suits that involved the everyday absurdities of life. Damage caused by unpenned livestock, property disputes, quarrels over badly maintained fences. The court also heard criminal and probate cases and administered an orphans' court.
From its founding in 1790 until 1812, St. Clair County's boundaries were constantly changing. From 1801 to 1812, the county's northern boundary was the Canadian border. In 1812, St. Clair County was reduced to near its present size. The county population shifted toward Belleville when the government opened the American Bottoms for settlement. As a result, in 1814, the county seat was removed from Cahokia to Belleville.
Major Nicholas Jarrot was one of the judges at the Cahokia Courthouse. Jarrot was a refugee from the French Revolution who made his fortune in the fur trade and land speculation. The Jarrot Mansion was occupied by members of his family for 95 years before becoming a school and later a convent. Restoration plans for the Jarrot Mansion are underway. The Jarrot Mansion is believed to be the oldest brick structure in Illinois.
The Cahokia Courthouse probably became a private residence again in 1814 after the county seat left Cahokia. The building had several uses in the 1800s. It was a town hall, warehouse, and was the site of the old courthouse saloon.
In the 1890s, photographs show the old courthouse in danger of collapse. It was purchased by Alexander Sella, who took the building apart, stored the walnut timbers, and reconstructed the building on the grounds of the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair.
When the World's Fair in St. Louis was over, the building was auctioned again. It was purchased by the Chicago Historical Society, dismantled again, and shipped to Chicago, where it was reconstructed in Jackson Park. By its second reconstruction, the building was much smaller than the one that left Cahokia and didn't look much like the old courthouse. One observer called the reconstruction rather a botch.
In 1927, the Chicago Park Board was persuaded to return the structure to Cahokia. 40 years after it was first dismantled, the courthouse was back in Cahokia, restored to its original size and shape, and it was dedicated in May of 1940.
Nearly 300 years have passed since French priests and traders settled below the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers and began trading goods and converting the natives to Christianity. Today, Illinois French heritage lives on in buildings like the Cahokia Courthouse, the Holy Family Log Church, in place names like St. Genevieve, Prairie du Rocher, and Fort de Chartres, and in local celebrations of French culture and heritage.